Oh, is that? Well, we've got a package past Argentina.
Yeah, I know.
Interest tickets. So, okay. We're ready to go. Good morning. Good morning. Is that on? Got a green light. Oh, that's on. Well, and good morning, everybody, and welcome to the council meeting of Monday, the 16th of October. Welcome to all of those who have joined us today. Nice to see so many of you out there. In terms of health and safety, just a reminder, if the alarm sounds, then make your way out the nearest exit, which is probably out the back there. And the assembly point is across the road from this building. Just be careful of the construction workers that are out there. Make your way through the maze that's out there. Just be aware, and then we'll just await instructions from the staff. Please be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and the video will be publicly available on YouTube. Reminding everyone and anyone who comes to speak to us, these microphones are quite directional, so if you move your head around, which I do when I'm talking, we lose the sound. So just speak straight into them and make sure that you've turned the button on and that it's green, and just one speaker on at a time, and that gives us some clarity. And a reminder for everyone to turn off their mobile phones. Shad, can I ask you to open with a karakia, please?
Tēnā koe Anne, tēnā koe irunga ngā akotanga o te wā, ko oti kia a te pōtitanga, ka taka oe rā akotanga kei ringi a tātou. Tēnā koe hirakira kia tātou katoa. Me kira i ngā kanohi hau, kei wainganui a tātou. Uruatahi, kia koe rā Gia, Ricky, mai ngā haramai. Me kira i ngā āpiha. Just want to acknowledge you first, Anne, given the recent events over the weekend, and a new government, but also to our members of the public, Ricky and Gia coming to present, and also our staff. But I'll just open with a short karakia and we'll move through it. Anui tātou. I te atua anei rā mātou he hui tahi nei, ka tuku e nei reo whakamoina te nei reo whakawhetai ki a koe, tōru mai rā tōru ngā kaha ki nei a mātou, hei āwhina, hei tōru nei a mātou, I roto I nei mai. Rewe te atua tēnei mātou ne tēnei ki a koe, kōru ki tōru.
Shad. Okay, so one of the special duties that we have as a governance team is to recognise the service of staff who provide to the organisation, who provide for the organisation and the community. So today it is my great privilege to ask Kim Fraser to come forward. Kim like to come up here. It's always, no, just come up here, that'd be lovely. I know it's hard, but to be the centre of attention, but that's what today's all about. So Kim joined the Tauranga City Council on the 15th of October 1998, which means she just completed her 25th year of service. So if this was a marriage, you'd be in line with some silverware. And sometimes it might seem like that, but unfortunately, Kim, we can only mark this milestone with some words of praise and our sincere thanks for your contribution to the city's waters operations over the past 2.5 decades. Kim's work is greatly valued by her colleagues who say that she not only does an excellent job of every responsibility she takes on, but she's a great leader, is passionate about the management of our waters assets, and has been instrumental in influencing positive change for the city's benefit. It's clear that Kim has staying power, because her first job for council was to load 15 years of paper-based maintenance records into our first digital asset management system. My God, She was therefore responsible for disappearing a mountain of paper, but along the way she also identified and implemented practices which helped create an efficient operating system. The introduction of water metering was Kim's next challenge, and in preparation for the installation of 39,000 water meters, she first had to knock the rating database into shape and input all the data for those new assets. So you certainly know your way around technology. By now you will have gained the impression that Kim is not easily daunted, and her administrative capabilities bring to mind the answer to the age-old question, how do you eat an elephant? Well, it's one bite at a time, of course. Over the years, Kim has contributed in other key respects. She's led a team of subject matter experts working across our parks and reserves and 3 water assets, ensuring that our systems and processes are fit for purpose and able to manage our assets effectively. Recently, she led a team of around 20 people to help implement our 3 Waters collaboration project, migrating all of our assets to the new WaterCare platform and ensuring the systems were in place for the commencement of the new Waters contract. Her encyclopedic knowledge of our assets, data and management then saw Kim seconded into the Water Services Reform Project as an asset data specialist, and we'll await with interest any announcements on the future of the reforms. Following the weekend's election process, we're all awaiting that. Suffice to say, yeah, I'm not holding my breath. However, in conclusion, Kim, thank you for 25 years of dedication to making our 3 water services one of the country's most efficient providers. And congratulations on your long service achievement milestone. So she deserves a huge round of applause. And of course, our water assets are probably the most important to our population. So absolutely critical work. Thank you, Kim. Right. Oh, we're losing half our audience. We all thought you came for us. Well deserved. Okay, so on with the meeting. No apologies, we're all here. We have no one booked in the public forum. Of course, we've got hearings later on. There's no late items that I'm aware of. No confidential business to be transferred into open. I'm not aware of any change to the order of business. That brings us then to the minutes of the council meeting held on the 11th of September. Any questions, comments? Bill's moving, Shad seconding. Looks to me like a very good record. No, I've got no changes. All right, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried, thank you. And then that brings us to the minutes of the council meeting held on the 25th of September. Any comments, questions? Bill moving, Chad seconding. True and correct record. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried, thank you. Any declarations of conflicts of interest? No, none, thank you. So that brings us to deputations, presentations and petitions. And today we have with us, is it Gia? Yeah. Gia Nelson of Mount Maunganui High School. And Gia has taken up a petition and she's going to come and present that to us. And welcome Ricky, her dad's come with her. So if you'd like to come up to the table there. And Gia, take the seat in front of the jug of water there. Now, do I understand you have a little video to show us? Is that right? But we're in your hands.
Kia ora tātou, ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. My name is Ricky Nelson. I am a representative for the Tangata Whenua Forum of Western Bay on the Smart Growth Leadership Group. I think it was around about a month ago. Gia, she represents the students of Mount Maunganui College. They initiated a petition. They presented it to the Smart Growth Tangata Whenua Forum to take and endorse. And then from that kaupapa, she was actually directed to this forum here to present that petition. So it was fully endorsed by the collective Tangata Whenua Forum for this particular kaupapa. But what I'll do is I'll let you play this video, and then after that, Gia can take it from there. Kia ora. This is at Maunganui Road intersection with Hewlett's Road. There's KFC. Mount College is just on the other side of the road.
Kia ora, ko Gia taku ingoa. Ki ngā tini mate ko wehe atu ki te pō. He ato kua whitu rangitia hoki mai ki a Georgia Ray te tamaiti. Te kaupapa e whakatō i a mātou i te rangi nei haere atu rā. Ki a tātou te hunga ora, no ngā hau e whā, no ngā iwi o te motu, tātou kua karapene mai i te rangi nei ki te whirawhira i tēnei take tai oriori mo te haumarutanga o ngā tamariki, pakeke o matapihi o Maunganui anō hoki. Ka mutu mō Tauranga whānui mai i ngā ara tareina tēnā tātou katoa. I have taken the initiative on behalf of Mount Maunganui College students to create a petition for the safety of pedestrians and cyclists while crossing rail lines within our school zone. After the tragic death of one of our local whānau members, we say enough is enough, and we students are going to make a stand. School kids have the right to be safe going to and from school. We should not risk death when there are reasonable and affordable safety measures available. For years, the community has raised these concerns with Council and NZTA, and we believe they have been ignored or these safety measures are slow to be implemented. We call on Tauranga City Council, Waka Kotahi and Kiwi Rail to implement these safety measures immediately. First, pedestrian barrier arms and eye-level signal lights at rail crossings at Matapihi Road, Bayfair, Hewlett's Road and Hull Road. Second, independent safety risk assessment for cyclists and pedestrians around school zones in Mount Maunganui, State Highway 2 Bayfair to Hull Road and Hewlett's Road. Third, the establishment of a student engagement forum with TCC so students have a place they can voice their concerns and be heard. The reasons around constructing safety measures for these three specific roads are simple. Hewlett's Road. Hewlett's Road is obvious. We lost a young life after her school day finished, while evidence shows it won't happen again. There are 3 schools around that area, Mount Intermediate, Mount College and Omanu Primary School. Hull Road. Hull Road sits next to the Mount Sports Centre and new skate park, where kids play netball, rugby, basketball, volleyball, tennis and more. This is a hazard because at times, there are no car parks near the field or courts, which forces parents to park near the track, making it unsafe for kids to be around. Matapihi Road. Matapihi Road holds little measures like railings but doesn't deny the fact that it is still dangerous. I used to attend Arataki Primary School, and their safety zone for tsunami was the Omanu Golf Club. That meant that they had to cross the railway to get to safety. With the safety measures such as barriers and lights, they will in fact save lives. I'm here to present to you today the petition for you to endorse and to support the voice of your rangatahi. Our school has raised concerns before Tauranga City Council, and these concerns have been ignored. And we hope that with your endorsement, it will add extra weight to our petition to get these safety measures in place. Here is the petition signed by Mount Maunganui students, teachers, and community. Ngā mihi nui.
Cool. So here's context around why this petition is actually so important. So this is students of Mount Maunganui College taking the initiatives to say, hey, for quite a few years, we've had so many submission opportunities to inform, infrastructure, the development of our local community around Arataki, Mount Maunganui, and that kind of thing. But now we've got a mechanism here where the students are actually presenting their voice. And unfortunately, Principal Alistair was unavailable to attend today. I think he might be online, and we're fully aware that there's been engagement at that level, and there's probably things moving behind the scenes as well. That being said, great opportunity for the students to be involved to actually put something forward as an important voice of their community as well. So, go on.
Kia ora, thank you very much, Ricky. I don't think you need to explain that. I think your daughter did it extremely well. And I understand you want to be going to law. I think you're going to be a great young lawyer for us. Look, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. As your dad said, there is quite a lot happening in the background. I know that one of our staff actually took, when the Kiwi Rail board were here recently, took them down, so they've had a look at particularly the site where the tragedy happened, the recent tragedy. But you're raising really good points there for us. A lot of it's out of our hands, but we can certainly advocate on behalf of the voice of students. So really thank you for taking the time, A, to get the petition, and then B, to bring it and present it today. So thank you very much. Any questions for you? Yeah.
Kia ora, Jen. Great to see you again. I think just from the conversation we had at the combined Tangata Whenua Forum, it's great to actually have you here. And I suppose one of the things why I wanted you to come here is that actually you'll get a response. So as part of this process is that there will be some after your presentation there will be some work by council staff to look at the things that we are doing, and there are a number of things we are doing in the background, and be able to provide you with a direct response. So rather than just coming and talking and then not actually seeing or seeing any movement or any action, you will get a response to the things that we are doing, or some of the things that we are within our control that we can do, or the things that we can advocate for. There are some things we can do. I mean, you raised a point about Hull Road. We are doing quite a lot of work around that Hull Road intersection with the skate park. And my daughter plays netball down there, so I'm aware of all of the issues with the car parking. And then over time, that will hopefully change with the relocation of the netball courts. In the meantime, council are looking at putting in some additional car parking down on Hull Road, where the overflow is, just on the other side of the crossing. And understanding some work about trying to promote and get better access across the railway link. On Matapihi Road, the level barriers, and I'm just aware that behaviour, we try and direct people and cyclists to do the right thing. And then sometimes human behaviour comes into it, and we either avoid the barriers or run through the barriers or take things into our own hands. And so we will do what we can to protect and keep people safe. But at the end of the day, people will make their own judgments about whether to stop or not. I did have a question though, just in terms of Matapihi Road. Have you had any conversations with the Matapihi community, given there's with the increased cycle through into the city just down here, and And so over time, you'd think that there would be more people using that route. Have you had any conversations with the Matapihi community at all? Or has it mainly been just through the school?
Personally, I haven't talked to the Matapihi community, but it's just been all through school, and having very serious conversations about all that stuff.
I could probably make a comment. So back in 2016, Arataki, so there's Matapihi, the cousins across the railway, and us in Arataki, the urban Māori are. Back in 2016, we had that issue around, taking away the underpass, which is a safe, connected, multimodal pathway for our communities to be connected to. Our cousin grows across the rail and that kind of thing. When we heard that it was getting taken away, our kids were involved at the time as students of Arataki, as well as intermediate, and I think during the campaigning they were and the promotional stuff that they were fully involved. So that's where the conversations started around that, and we're fully aware and we respect the mana of the hapu there at Matapihi, and I know that they have some concerns around having those pathways through their raw here, which is fair enough. But the fact is, just across the railway, that there's also a pathway to, Owen's Place, shopping centres, but also perhaps a connecting with the stadium as well, which a lot of our kids play basketball and all the other kaupapa. So that. Back in the early days, that's where the engagement with Matapihi and Arataki whānau happened. But from the students, they identified within their school zone just those 3 level crossings they believe are high risk. And I also do recognise, when you talk about human behaviour and that kind of thing, yes. But the fact is, if you have pedestrian crossings there, you saw that video, okay? So here's a kid crossing a main road, looking down, distracted, looking at the vehicles, looking at the cars, there's lots of noise and that kind of thing around as you're on a crossing, you're still looking down and negotiating that way. Our perception as adults, with our peripheral views, we can come up with our own assumptions. But the fact is, if we have those measures in place, you can ask a question, well, that's girls without a doubt.
Okay, there's not time for a big debate. Any other questions? I think we just witnessed at Matapihi, the site was going round the grids and not stopping, but I think that's what Chad was referring to. Yep.
Just one last. I do take the point about the engagement, and it would be useful for us to be able to connect with the college as well.
Yeah.
Are you involved with INSTEP, the Priority 1 Young Leaders Forum, where Priority 1 pulls together all of the schools from around and talk about whether it's climate change or topical issues and those kinds of things? Are you involved in that forum?
No, I'm not involved in that forum.
I think it would be, so one of the things I think is missing, and in your petition you are suggesting that we have a liaison with a group of students from the school. I think that might be quite helpful particularly when we're looking at that multimodal, and too often we talk about cycling, but we don't necessarily talk about pedestrians, and there is no voice for the pedestrians in some of those conversations. I think that would be quite helpful to get some input, particularly when we're talking the redesign of Hewlett's Hull, Tortora, all of that area, and then this area. So we might just take you up on that. Okay, any other questions? No, nothing. Thank you very much. So someone take the petition from, have we got a copy of that? No, you're tabling that. And then the process is that the staff will do a bit of work and we'll get back to you, Gia. We'll get back to you, but I think it's a good conversation that you've started. There is a lot happening in the background through Waka Kotahi and Kiwi Rail, which seems to take forever. But I know that we are looking to get we are pushing to have some early immediate work done whilst they get a long-term process in place that goes through all the budgets and all the planning, etc. But we'll get you all that information. And then I think your suggestion of a student representational group is a very good one. So thank you for that. And thanks for coming along today. Well done. Okay. So that brings us to the agenda item 11.1, adoption of the draft development contributions policy. Ben, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. The policy today is to adopt the draft DCP for the purpose of public consultation alongside the long-term plan in November this year. It comes up in context. We came to you in early September with a report just on the Te Papa Peninsula local development contributions catchment. We also came sort of early in the last financial year to talk about our overall DC work program. And then we've had some conversations outside chambers around most of these issues. So you'll see from the report that we've tackled 4 points. One is the bit that we do every year, which is aligning the DC policy with our annual or long-term plan for projects yet to be delivered. So looking at where cost estimates or delivery timelines have changed, and then reflecting the underlying assumptions around financial costs, inflation, and growth assumptions, that type of thing. So as I said, that happens every year, and it's sort of a very tightly wound in with the overall long-term planning process, which means as well that because this is a draft, you obviously have consultation and deliberations to come on the long-term plan. This development contribution policy will reflect any of those decisions that come through in time. So that's sort of the primary reason that it's a draft at the moment. We've then gone for 3 more substantive changes, which were reflected in the work program that we identified a couple of years ago. So the first one is the Te Papa catchment. The reasoning for that, I think we went through quite a bit of detail on the 4th. That will. So the first thing we still need to refine on the Te Papa catchment is its relationship with our TSP IFF. By introducing DC funding, there's a risk that it displaces our IFF funding and may have negative impacts on the financial efficiency of that funding tool. There's a bunch of work going on in the background to ensure that that's minimised to the extent possible. Then the other thing I just wanted to note for that catchment, and it's in the paper, is that the Te Papa catchment will sit inside the Tauranga infill catchment. So if you're, for those who are sort of assessing their potential DC obligations, they need to be aware that it's both of those catchments. So it's the Te Papa one in residential property, and then an extra sort of 4,000 per lot on top of that. So they work in conjunction. The second change is to introduce a sort of a large residential category. It used to be 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3+ bedrooms. We've looked around at some other councils in New Zealand, and also some work done by local developers who have sort of been pushing for this change for several years. There is evidence that 4+ bedroom properties have a markedly different demand profile to 3-bedroom properties. And so the impact of that is that we don't increase our overall DC revenue, but we are able to then lower the costs for 1, 2, and 3-bedroom properties. And then the final change is looking a little more closely at the demand and benefit factors for aged care facilities, being those sort of dementia care or hospital care private facilities, and the DCs that they pay. And we are putting up a collection of changes that reduce their contribution towards primarily sort of community facilities, reserves, community centres, those sorts of things, on the basis that they aren't generating a large amount of demand and they're not really benefiting from those facilities. Very happy to take questions on the substance of those. I'll just quickly run through our next steps from here. So we have already started communication with the community through our Pānui and Toolbox email newsletters. Because this report hadn't come up and those comms are run monthly, we took the chance earlier this month to send it out with more general sort of signalling around the substance that we're doing and the fact that there would be price rises coming through for many catchments, but we weren't able to go into any particular detail around exact rises. But the signalling has started. We've also had a development sector forum, which is with the larger land and building developers. That was about a week ago. And I was able to talk them through this report in much more detail. Didn't actually share it, but it has since been shared with them. And then the next step will be to go back to those Pānui and Toolbox email newsletters and give much more granular detail and link people through to where they can see what these draft changes are. And then that will, as I said, link into consultation on 15 November. Take any questions on any of that?
Okay, questions? You got a question? Oh, you thought I was going to go.
Yeah.
I guess what's concerning us really, one thing that's concerning us is the huge cost increases from, and if you look at paragraph 15, Waiari has increased from 50 million to 133 million, and Cambridge Road from 6.5 to 27.5 million. And so that's a real concern to us that those original estimates were so far out, and we now feel like we're playing a bit of catch up. And what it does is it sort of undermines the confidence that we have then in the development contributions that we're then going to be charging. Do you follow the logic? We didn't get it right the first time, but we got it right this time because we can't go back and recoup. Yeah. I knew it wasn't Ben.
I'm happy to comment on that. So over the last couple of years, we've introduced new systems and processes for project estimation. And if we look to the past, we have had a history of underestimating, and by the time the project is completed, we've actually come in with numbers well above what was originally estimated. So I would actually argue that this should increase confidence that we're getting the numbers closer to what can be expected by the time we cut the ribbons for those projects. And that's not to say that we've done anything wrong in terms of the project implementation in the past, but we have, it's a very, civil construction particularly is a very risky area with a lot of unknowns. And in the past, we've done a pretty good job of doing risk assessments of the things that we know that we don't know. But we are now building in contingencies for the risk or the stuff that we don't know. And that's the thing that in the past has kind of jumped up and bit us. So also the big jumps depend a little bit on how old those estimates are. So there's a big component of cost, general cost increases. We all know what's happened to that, particularly since the early 2020 with COVID and the general global market and cost increases that are sitting for, depending on what it is, somewhere between 30 and 50%, I think is generally accepted for those construction costs, depending on which area it is and which materials it is we're dealing with. But yes, I would like us to think that this should actually increase our confidence in getting the numbers right. And Paul would probably be able to comment on how often in the past we have overcharged DC, and I actually don't think it has happened ever.
Yeah, no, that's correct, and there is obviously a shortfall in DC funding that's transferred to rate fund debt of approximately 50 million, so that's correct.
Yeah, so take any other questions on that?
Sorry, can I just add to that? In terms of DC under collection for these projects, because these ones are funded over about a 30 or 40 year period, the under collection is likely to be very low because we are still delivering them quite early in that funding period. So for Waiari, we have intentionally started the DC funding period towards when the construction date was closer, because it does minimise that risk of constant cost increases and therefore decreases your under collection. And I think the other point is just adding is that we do have to be cautious, because if we start collecting at a higher cost and the cost goes down, then you increase your risk of having to refund the DCs, which probably creates much more of a challenge than the under collection.
It's all a bit of an art rather than a science, is what you're saying. The question is, have we aimed high enough but not too high? Bill?
Thanks, Chair, and certainly on the same theme. Nick, do I then take it that there is a much higher level of project planning and scrutiny in terms of those estimates before they get put into the DC framework? Because when I look at page 61 of the agenda, and this is talking about the State Highway 2 Mains Network Welcome Bay Road, the high level of under-assessment pricing is due to the uncertainty of this project, as planning for this project has not been finalised. So what I'm looking for, that there is part of a process now that level of estimation has a much higher level of confidence before it gets into a DC framework. So that's just my first question.
Yes, there's. So there's a couple of things around that. So there's particularly the phase we're at by the time we plug these numbers in, and how they fit into the LTP and where we're at with the DC charging and policy. So if it's a scheme assessment, the uncertainty will be a lot greater than what it is by the time it's sort of funneled towards implementation, where we've done the ground investigations, where we've got a final design, maybe even by the time we get tender prices in the box. So it is early on in the piece when we do have to set these, there is a relatively high level of uncertainty. We do as much as we can to get the cost estimates right, but at the end of the day, there are unknowns that we have to take into consideration. And what the other thing around this is that we are putting a different level of governance and oversight in around the decision making for our suite of projects, whether it's transport or Three Waters or whatever. So we are relying on a greater level of particularly external expertise in terms of understanding projects' risks and contingencies. So we think the processes and systems that we have been putting in place recently and that we are developing over the next number of months is going to help with this as well.
Yeah, I suppose the concern being is that there are estimates put in, there's a level of fees, people make, whether they're developers, people building houses or whatever, then make decisions. And it's much, much harder for them to actually change halfway through when the price goes up. So that's just reflecting a concern, and that's why looking for that much higher level of scrutiny before they actually get in and we start charging for them. I probably don't have as and the comment was made in terms of we charge too much, we've got a refund. I'm not too sure how many instances we've actually fallen into that particular situation. I know there was a certain car park redevelopment over at the Mount where there was concern about that. So I think we do need to make sure that we are pitching at that right level. My second question, what else is in the DC projects? We've got two examples here. Are we doing that assessment to make sure there's nothing else that's quietly smoking away in terms of potential significant increases?
Well, I think, is the question project specific, or is it more generally, what are we looking at across our suite of DCs and
projects that are in that suite of DCs? Because we're looking at,
Yeah.
we've got two particular examples here. We'd hate to see that in some time something else comes back to, hey, we've got a similar situation.
So at a broader level, the whole long-term plan goes through a process sitting under our capital projects assurance division, which actually looks at effectively the quality of the costing. And I think what's fair to say is projects that are further out obviously have a greater level of uncertainty. At that point, there's greater level of contingency and optimism bias that's included in the project, reflecting where they are in their development phase, which isn't a perfect science, but it's based on history over time of how those projects have actually rolled out, which is what Nick was referring to. And then as those projects progress through their planning cycle, the level of contingency and bias effectively is replaced by effectively updated costing. So it's a refined methodology that's improving over time. It will never be perfect, but it's based on history to effectively get to where we are now, what those numbers are.
So, sorry, can I add again that I guess from the DC staff side is that we are often going through the projects, and particularly our job is probably to focus on the ones that are further out, which are getting less, I guess, attention, and making sure that the staff are reviewing them, considering them, ensuring that the scope stayed up to date, because obviously some of these projects have been in there for 20, 30 years. If you look at Welcome Bay or Hawiti, where we started funding the projects when we structure planned, and so obviously the requirements changed. So our job is often to look at those ones further out. So I mean, I think there'll always be cost increases and projects that change in scope, but we do make sure that the staff do kind of look at the projects, consider them, and say yes, those costs are still reasonable, or is within the reasonable, and that the scope has not changed.
So it's critical parts of the process, but what you're saying is you put in place much more rigour at that early stage to get the project cost, and then build in those different contingencies up. What do you call it? Optimism bias?
Well, we call it under assessment now because it's recent feedback.
Yeah. So that's quite critical, that early stage, and then keeping a focus on scope, because they can change quite dramatically over a long period of time. Yeah. All right, Stephen.
In my experience with optimism bias is proponents of projects within organisations estimating low to get their project in the planning pipeline. Sometimes with the knowledge that the estimates are low, but if you get into the system that your project's in there, and you keep your head low for a while, and then it kind of rolls around, and then suddenly your project's top of the list, and then all sorts of surprises come out. And I think it's that culture that we want to make sure is not happening in our context. And I am reassured, thank you, that we have a much more rigorous process, particularly important given that we have a long-term plan process in place now with significant capital investment program in it. We cannot afford underestimation or deliberate optimism bias going in there. We need to make sure that we are covering for risk contingencies, and thank you for your reassurance. My question goes to Ben. You mentioned, Ben, that you have been signalling where this is headed with the development forum. I'm interested in the feedback to date and aware that they haven't got the full detail, but the feedback to date, and also the actual house builders as opposed to the developers, and that they've got line of sight about the proposed changes coming through.
Yeah, I don't have much for you because they were incredibly quiet. So they sort of, we talked through it in a greater level of detail than we have today, and sort of the reasoning and the methodology that we had used, and sort of just nodded, and that was that. I mean, I'd committed to sending this report out after the meeting, so perhaps it'll sort of filter through. That was only sent out this week because the agenda went up on Wednesday, so perhaps this week we'll get something more and we can make sure that comes back through to you, so you've got some visibility of that leading in. We do see consistent submissions on these points from the same people year in, year out, and we think that we have responded to those submissions fairly. So maybe applying my own optimism bias and thinking that it's going to go, maybe they'll be supportive, but yeah, maybe not.
I think that general house builders are always hard because until they actually see the number, they don't really can't provide a lot back. And so while we've given some signalling that citywides are going to go up again, because they're the ones that's the fee that affects them, we won't really know until we give them the actual number, which we haven't been able to do.
Actually, I should say that I signalled it was 20% or higher at that meeting. And again, as I said, no response, or just silence. So.
I think the criticality of this is really, it was underlined in our first round of LTP, and it's a kind of a no surprises environment is really important, and early knowledge, at least of the direction, if not the detail, I think is vital. So it's good to hear that you are engaged in that process, and I would only encourage it as early as you are able. And obviously we've got to go through meeting processes, but yeah, we want a no surprises environment as much as we can achieve.
So you mentioned the Developers Forum. We also have had representations and visits from master builders who we offered the opportunity to come and speak in the public forum today, but didn't suit. Are you also liaising with master builders and large building groups?
Yeah, so master builders is on that forum, so that has gone in front of them. In terms of who else is out there that's not on the forum, I don't actually know off the top of my head, but we can have a think about that.
Yeah. I think that it's the house builders that's the actual building fraternity that we would also like to be given those early heads up.
Our main way of communicating with them is the building and planning teams. They have a monthly newsletter that goes out. So wherever possible, we're putting what we know in there. And then obviously as soon as this is adopted, we will be putting that out there. And that's probably the best method of contacting them. We also kind of have options for people to click if they want to, be on our DC policy list, but mostly it just ends up being duplicate names. So it's the same people who are on multiples of those lists. So the next newsletter will be the big one for that.
So I've got a couple of questions. Have you guys finished or some more? Go on.
It was just clarification in terms of the table on paragraph 22. It talks about the draft charge for September, then the draft charge including inflation and cost of capital. So I'm just wanting some clarity what we're going out with, given what's talked about in terms of we've increased the transport charge but reduced the reserves charge.
It's all yours, Liz. Thank you. So Fitch Papa?
Paragraph 22.
Yes. So the base charge we're talking about, the draft charge, is just the capital expenditure so we look at it and we say how much we think this is going to cost, and then we have to add on further costs associated with that project for the debt holding costs in the period that it takes us to collect all of the DCs needed to fund the share of that project. And then we also apply inflation on top where we say, well, the project's not being delivered all this year, so we inflate it in the same way that the LTP would inflate it. But legislatively, we're required to separate out the capex from the financing costs.
Okay, so the charge itself will be 11,700, for example.
That's right, and that's
It's just making sure that there is that clarity. Because when I looked at it first, I thought draft charge 6,300, and then that's why I didn't quite understand 5,400. So I think in terms of the communication, what the total is, because then 23A now makes more sense.
That was my question. It's the other way around.
Okay, sorry. So that what we were trying to communicate here was, as you know, we came to you in September and we gave you a sense of what the likely local DC charge for Te Papa would be. We've continued to work in the subsequent 6 weeks and refine the methodology for those charges. So what I came to you in September is the middle column. What we're saying the draft charges are now is the right-hand column, so they've generally gone down. And then those will be added together. For example, if you're building a 3-bedroom home, you'll pay the...
No, stop. No,
Stop, sorry.
So because I had exactly the same question, because 23A says we've increased the transport charge, but when I look at transport residential, the draft in 4th of September was 6,300. Now you're telling me it's 5,400, which to me is a decrease, not an increase. But we're adding those two together.
No, you're right. It has overall gone down. There have just been factors in the changes since the 4th of September that have moved it both up and down, but overall it is a decrease.
Well, then why do you say in 23A that it's increased the transport charge and decreased the reserves charge? Shouldn't that be the other way around in the report? Because the reserves has gone up and the transport has come down.
Yes, you're correct.
Right, let's change that in the report. Because then when you were talking, I thought you were going to add those two together and it was 11,700 altogether. Okay, right. So let's.
When you said add together, I think you meant transport and reserves is adding together, not.
Right. So let's get that changed in 23.
The report needs to be crystal clear when we communicate.
Thanks, Bill. Shared.
Just on the 4 dwellings, four bedroom charge. I think it's a great idea for us to look at trying to get some equity in the system. I did have a quick look. I'll jump on Stats New Zealand and see what how many people are living in 4 bedroom homes and all that kind of thing. I couldn't actually. Well, I'll be there half the night trying to work it out, but. Then I jumped on Vital Updates and they had some quite good information on there. So when I looked at it, it indicated that across the city we've got 37% of our housing stock is 4 bedroom or more, so 4 bedroom or more. And of that, 54%, so 4 people or more, occupy those dwellings, and it's about 50% or 54% of the capacity. So, thinking about how this will change over time, but also think about the whole cost of living issue that we have at the moment. There's a lot of people out surfing. There's a lot of overcrowding, all those kinds of things. I suspect we'll probably see a lot more of that occurring over time. So. I think from an equity point of view, moving towards a 4-bedroom charge, I think kind of makes sense. And then also relieving some of the pressure on 1s, 2s and 3s.
On that same one, when I look at that graph, the top of page 51, so we end up with 107,000, 108,000 occupants. But we've got a population of 160,000. So where's the rest?
So when we've pulled this data, we've had to pull it from 2013 census results, actually. This information wasn't available in 2018, and so we, much like HCC, have used the 2013 data. The goal is to then update it with the upcoming data results, which are next year, we're hoping. While the numbers are lower, we think that the proportions that they reflect will still hold in terms of occupancy. It reflects data that we use elsewhere in the LTP as well.
You're not like share and use final updates. It's a bit more current. 2013 is a hell of a long time ago. Okay. So have you any more questions? Stephen, did you have a question?
No, I've asked my one. Happy to move the recommendations, Chair.
I've still got a couple of questions. I just want to know from the retired, so the bedrooms makes sense. And it's also good to see that we're getting a good number of 2-bedroom units built. The question on the aged care facilities, so does that apply right across the board? Because many of those facilities have both care homes and hospital care and dementia wards, as well as villas and, where people are living quite independently. And those people will use our facilities, whereas those who are in hospital type care won't. So are we dividing between those two? We are. Okay.
Yes.
And then just for clarity, because we did have this at an earlier meeting, but I think the Te Papa one is the hardest one to understand why we're coming back and having another go. And so as you say, for someone who's building, they'll have two bits, two prices. So could you just quickly run through why it is that we're doing that, just to get it on record?
So the 2 different catchments for Te Papa.
Yeah.
So the first one is already existing. It's called the Tauranga infill catchment, and it collects DCs towards one piece of infrastructure, which is the Southern Pipeline, and that's at roughly $4,000 per month. And that supports through what we call the Tauranga infill catchment, which runs from the city centre to the south along the Te Papa Peninsula, all the way out through the Western Corridor, supports Bethlehem, as well as sort of a large collection of Western catchments, all at the same price point. Those catchments, many of them include the Southern Pipeline within their catchment. So if you're in West Bethlehem, you'll be charged for a list of infrastructure, including the Southern Pipeline. Here, we haven't removed the Te Papa Peninsula from the Tauranga infill catchment. We've run the 2 catchments alongside each other, and that was sort of a practical decision which related to sort of the uncertainty around water reform. So in time, we might be able to reconcile that to one catchment, which would be, it's more a question of usability for our ops teams, but it'd be simpler to understand for people proposing developments. The Te Papa catchment, the Te Papa infill catchment, separate to the Tauranga infill catchment, essentially collects all the other infrastructure that benefits growth or is caused by growth in that catchment other than the Southern Pipeline. So it upgrades to roading and the reserves network in that space.
So the important thing is that it's an addition. You've got to pay, it's both.
That's correct, it's both. So if you're looking at sort of $8,000 for Te Papa, excluding GST, and then a further $4,000 for Tauranga infill, again excluding, so more like $12,000 for.
Thank you very much. And Stephen's moving and you're seconding, and no doubt we will get commentary and submissions on this through the long-term plan. All right, any further discussion, questions? All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Centre Development Incentive Fund. Gareth. Oh, and Ed.
I think we're just happy to table the report as read and answer any questions.
So, so you've been busy and we've got a busy summer coming up. I think my only question is, I'm just a bit worried that we're losing focus on accommodation in the city, because long term, that's going to make the most difference. If we can get people living there, that's guaranteed feet on the ground. So my question to you is there anything on the horizon? Is there, and if not, is there something that you think you can turn your mind to bring the focus back into that?
Yeah, good question, and definitely on the same page in terms of trying to look to stimulate opportunities to develop residential and or student accommodation in the city centre. Three specific sites are of some interest at the moment. So we had two originally, and both of those have fallen through because the market, cost of capital, cost of construction is just not making the development stack up at the moment. One of those has got another life through a government agency that are looking into it as a possibility. And then there's two other sites in the city centre that we're looking at the moment, trying to stimulate and support developers to take a genuine interest in converting the opportunity to some form of accommodation. In terms of where they're both at, they feel like long shots, but we are trying to do everything we can to say, what could we do to help you to turn that opportunity into something that might actually eventuate into some form of accommodation in the city centre. Yeah, so I don't really have anything else to say other than we're trying, and it's really that development market that we've just got to support to say, how can we help, you know, to see if we can turn something that's marginal into something that's actually viable.
And particularly student accommodation, because that is the key for the expansion of the university. And don't forget, we've got the funds that we've identified that, you know, there are ways that we could also be supporting, just as we're doing through the Housing Equity Fund. There are ways that we could use that fund to help. And some of that might just make the difference between the market. But I think it's really critical for the CBD.
Happy to ramp up our focus on that in the next couple of months, and as we go into the new year and report back in terms of where the three opportunities that we know about at the moment have got to, but any others that may have come up.
Bill.
And would certainly support that, Chair, in terms of looking at those opportunities. I just comment and a question. In terms of my comment, I'd just like to acknowledge the work, Gareth, you and the team, in terms of those engagement opportunities, and as noted in the report, that direct connection with over 2,000 people in terms of some of that messaging and the opportunities for them to understand what's happening. So, and I've had some good feedback around the city about those opportunities. So just well done to you and the team on that. Question, in terms of projects in the last 12 months, the support regarding the licence to occupy relief, has there been much interest or uptake in terms of that opportunity?
All of the city centre businesses that pay an LTO just automatically got it reduced over that period of time through to 30 June next year. It's something that we're going to have a chat about early in the new year, whether it's something we extend over another year, but at this point, anyone that had an LTO in the city centre automatically got an 80% discount through to 30 June next year.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to echo the previous sentiments around both accommodation and the work that the staff are doing. I think it's really good, and particularly highlight paragraph 17, where we get the anecdotal feedback. First time in 11 years that I felt like the council cares about the safety and wellbeing of local businesses and their staff. So good work for putting your staff member on the street. It's greatly appreciated, and that has been the feedback that we have received. I think what I'm looking for with regard to the next 300k and future investment is, what is the priority that is coming from the business community? Because the more that we can get the community itself driving the agenda, but in a prioritised way, not just a wish list of things, but actually if they were making decisions out of their own budgets, wherever they put it, I think that would be helpful. Just looking through what we've committed to date, the arts sector seem to have done well. So they probably had their share is kind of where my thinking's at. But it would be great to see a very strong prioritised investment program coming from the business community itself. So that by that process, we would get their buy-in and support that we are doing as much as we possibly can.
That's great feedback, appreciate that. And at all of those engagement sessions, we've absolutely said to local businesses and the groups we've been engaging with, that we don't have all the ideas. If we had a silver bullet, we would have fired it already. So absolutely come to us with any ideas and any feedback you've got. We've had some great feedback, but we'll just keep asking that question. And in fact, we have the Priority 1 AGM in a couple of weeks, and then there's the Downtown Tauranga AGM, I think, next week. So we'll make sure we get along to those and pose exactly the same question and get those ideas coming in so that we have the opportunity to prioritise and, like you say, let businesses own those decisions as opposed to us doing it for them.
Yeah, because I mean, I know the car parking issue is important, and we have put a lot of effort into addressing that and increasing capacity, but we do need to think beyond just car parking, because car parking is not the total issue here.
Yeah, one suggestion we had from one of the engagements was what is the future plan for the city from a retail strategy point of view? I was like, okay, well, that's a great suggestion. And I don't know that it's necessarily council's role to decide what that should be, but maybe we fund Downtown Tauranga to engage an expert to do a piece of work so that when we're bringing businesses into the city centre over the next couple of years, it's consistent with a collective vision for the retail strategy of the city centre. So that was something that we haven't paid for yet, but we took on board as an idea out of one of those engagement sessions that we're really keen to support.
Through you, Chair, that's exactly the sort of example that I have in mind. You know, if you're in a shopping mall, they have a very clear strategy about what retail mix they will have and how they can support both their existing tenancies and expand. And we need to have that same sort of strategic view, I think, for the CBD.
Shad.
Just kind of building on that same thing, and support Stephen's comments about businesses actually taking the lead when it comes to how the city will develop over time. But also thinking about, construction is about to start on Te Manautaki. We've got a couple of building sites already around the city, and the courthouse development underway in the next 12 months or so. So you've got a kind of a captive audience in the city of potentially a couple of hundred construction workers. And I think for the business sector to actually think about how they might adjust, they might adapt to reaching those, to that audience in the city centre. Well, maybe a mix of food. You might have professionals in there, the professional services, the project managers, the engineers, around in the city. So it's how does the sector kind of adjust and look for opportunities when you've got a captive audience and potentially a couple of hundred people in the CBD.
A question, and one Anne and I were talking about on email a week or so ago. What does resilience and adaptation look like in the city centre over the next couple of years, and how do our businesses, or how do we support those businesses to identify new opportunities and pounce on them? And some businesses have done it and done it well already, but it's definitely something we can challenge Downtown Tauranga to say, right, well, how do you get behind all of your downtown businesses and challenge them to do things differently and respond to the opportunity? Because there's a steamroll of development, which, like you say, is driving a captive audience. So how do they capitalise on it and make the most of it, as opposed to focus on some of the negatives like potentially car parking? So happy to also kind of pass on that challenge to local businesses.
And just to add to that, we're actually funding the Chamber of Commerce as well, additional funding for mentoring for exactly that sort of things, so that we can also direct them to focus on that.
But I understand that the take-up hasn't been great. That's what worries me, is that, because there's an army of high-vis vests in the city, and it's only going to grow while businesses are struggling, and particularly some of our hospitality who say, my lunchtime trade has disappeared. Well, how do we work alongside them too? Because some of them are so busy working in their business that they don't have the time to think outside the square. So I thought that additional funding for the business chamber would be good, but I understand from the business chamber there hasn't been a huge pickup. Maybe that's something that could come up at both of those AGMs. Yeah.
Happy to table both of those, yep.
Happy to move.
Have we moved? We're only receiving it, aren't we? Do we get this report every 6 months?
Yep, 6 months.
Okay. And Stephen seconded. Anything else? I just reiterate, we certainly are getting great comments back on the visibility, the work that you're doing. In fact, someone was saying the other day that Gareth, for the first time, they trust when you come in and tell them something, they trust what you tell them. I'm thinking, goodness, I haven't heard that before. So it's all worthwhile. I know it's really time consuming, but especially the disruption that we know is happening. We're going to be talking about it later on again. Just keeping that constant communication is just so invaluable, both to them and to us. So thanks very much. Okay, I put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 11.3, social procurement. Social procurement targets.
Just while Melanie and Carlo and Angela are coming up, the concept of buying local is important to us as a council, and it certainly intersects a lot with stimulating the local economy. And there's lots of angles for that, and included in that is buying from Māori and Pacifica businesses to support that local economy, but also to support the community. With that in mind, I'll hand over to the team.
Thanks. Carlo's joined us.
We'll take the paper as read, but we just have a few comments to make in advance. This is really all about giving a bit of a shot of adrenaline to our procurement policy, which came in 2021, and boosting on the delivery of the original intent that was put in place, and also aligning it to the sustainability approach implementation plan that came in June of this year. We really want to develop council's role in creating opportunities for local business. It's quite related to the previous item as well. We want to make sure that we're procuring goods and services, that at the same time we're maximising the benefits for our community. For instance, like a large construction project, we want to know from our suppliers if waste is going to be produced, how are you going to deal with that waste to minimise the impact. We want to diversify our supply base and provide more opportunities for Māori and Pacifica businesses and other small and medium-sized businesses. Social enterprises as well, we see that we can increase our engagement with them. They're not, they don't tend by the nature of their work to play a big role in the capital works projects, but we think they can play a bigger role in the engagement space and the sustainability space as well.
Kia ora tātou, mihi ana ki a koe share, nau atu whera te tātou hui. Yeah, good to see everybody. I think, from my point of view and the Takawanga point of view, we're conscious there's a big capital program in front of us and a big ongoing program. And I think one of the gaps we've seen in the supplier base has been Māori and Pacific businesses in particular. We've had lots of conversations with them over the last wee while about developing their connection, their capacity and capability to connect them with their program. They've talked to us a lot about the benefits that they would bring in terms of longevity in the area, being able to offer employment into people that are going to be here for a long time and therefore join their journey. So we've been working at a range of different barriers to them participating, but keeping that within our normal processes. But I think what this does is says, do we have a conscious eye on including those different people and adding them to the range of suppliers we have available to help us achieve our targets? And I think we have an opportunity to do that. When we had a look back at the current engagement, we can see it's really low. So it's really an opportunity to develop and grow that right alongside everybody else. And the proposal is aligned a lot towards central government's movements in the last wee while and other councils across the country who have been committed into having targets around that 5% mark in the past. And so really it's just aligning that and joining that wave and being able to have a conscious eye on adding those people to that supplier base.
Makes sense. It's just part of what a normal community does, make sure that as what is it, as the ship rises, we take everyone with us. Is that the metaphor? Something rises and we make sure we take everything with us. But if we're growing our capital spend, we want to make sure that all our businesses are benefiting from that. And this particular group, there's lots of impediments to them being considered. So putting a specific eye on them, I think will have long-term benefits.
Famous Pākehā whakataukī, a rising tide lifts all boats.
That's it, thank you. Thank you very much. But also as a former minister at MSD, I can tell you that if you look in the places where there is high unemployment and look to see how you can bring those people into employment, it actually affects the social well-being of your whole community. So I'm happy to move it. Right. Any other discussion? Share.
A few years ago, I was quite involved with bidding for Tauranga, which is the Anotui Gorge project with Tahi, and one of their key objectives of that project was around delivering on social outcomes. And I actually went back and had a look at the project. So it's 650 odd million over 5 years. When you think about our capital program, next year alone, will be close to 450 million. And I've got a whole suite of things that are looking, environmental, social, economic initiatives, and then also partnering with mining and delivering on some of their broader outcomes as well. But actually putting some of those things in place now, knowing what we know in terms of what the city needs over the next 10 years, and actually starting to build that. Because I think from a city point of view, it's about building our capability and capacity locally, rather than having to import people, services, goods from outside our city. So it's a great initiative, I think, for us to tap into and also support.
Thanks, Sue. Okay. Got the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Well done, thank you. And for the most excitement of the day, that brings us to traffic and parking bylaw amendment. I couldn't resist that, so. Brendan.
I'll take the paper as read, since I know it is the most exciting one of the day. Probably the main change with this one is just the change to the parking permits to catch up with technology. So now that we have the cameras on the vehicles, we don't need the older system. So we're just asking for a change in bylaws so that in the future we can be far more adaptive, particularly as we look to roll out more CBD parking, which comes up in paper 11.6. Happy to take any questions.
Questions? Share.
So thanks, Brendan, for the paper. And I assume, we've got a couple of residents up on, I think, First Ave that use, there's a couple of car parks set aside for them. So using this type of technology, when our vehicles are driving around, it'll hopefully pick up their number plates and they'll be exempt from getting a ticket. Is that how it would work?
Or not,
That's correct.
or not.
So the idea is that the Camry, we can load into the system the registration number, and therefore the car can sort of automatically pick it up, and then we can not issue the ticket to those particular vehicles in that area.
Bill?
Just on that particular matter, Brendan, so presumably we charge that now, and the proposition is for $180 per annum or thereabouts in terms of the new methodology.
So there is currently an annual charge for car parking. I could get Reece up just to confirm whether the numbers are changing, but that 180 is sort of the cost of providing that permit. So it's not designed to encourage revenue, it's just covering the cost of actually having the permit sitting there and operating for the year. And ideally they're set up for particularly residential properties that don't have any on-site car parking. So you'll see in 11.6, in some cases, some properties don't have any on-street car parking. They've had it currently, and I guess what we're looking at is, as we transition through, do those current owners have a permit? A subsequent owner, if they bought the property, wouldn't be given that same permit, but the current owner, because they bought the property with the on-street parking available, may be in a different situation to a future owner who buys it knowing that there is no on-street provision that's free.
I think we're going to have to look at that very carefully, given the rules now. We can't require car parking when someone's building a home or altering a home. So we are going to have to look very closely at that, understand there is a transition, but you can't even maintain that forever either, because I mean the cost of providing that car parking, as we know, is incredibly expensive, particularly close around the city. Stephen.
I totally agree. It was a point I was going to raise. I mean, we are going to have to start to think about charging for revenue as opposed to just covering our costs, because there is no such thing as a free car park. And the more that buildings are developed without car parking on site, the more incentive there is for the council to have to pick up that responsibility. And so it's a really critical policy issue that we're going to have to address. If anything, we want to incentivise developers to provide car parking of their own. Otherwise, we'll end up carrying the cost, and the community will end up carrying the cost, and those businesses that would just spend a lot of money to try and support will end up carrying the costs. So, you know, this is quite a significant disconnect between policy and reality in the market, and we're going to have to try and find a way to counterbalance that.
And it's interesting that, you know, we've had this conversation with some of the developers. At this stage, they're saying there is no market for us to build apartments and townhouses without car parking. But if it's freely available, or if it's available and they can then secure on-street parking, then you start chipping away at that desire of people to have that sure parking capacity.
It's amazing how cost and revenue starts to change that philosophy from a developer point of view, because I saw this in Auckland, where similar sentiment was expressed by the market that, oh, we'll have to provide car parks because that's the market expectation. But then quite a few developers started doing buildings without parking, and it's become increasingly more than normal.
Well,
Just a follow-on, I think it's again one of those areas where some legislative change might be required. So I'm just looking at paragraph 25, where the charges are limited to the cost of implementation. So I think it goes on to our list to add. And then secondly,
we should be able to charge. I'm channeling Wayne Brown here, which is a bit of a worry. But we should be able to charge what our costs actually are, not what Wellington decides they are.
Yes.
So we should be able to charge the actual cost, whether it's a cost of service or provision or both. But they're our costs that shouldn't be decided in one.
And my next final comment is in terms of the implementation of this, I could see the attraction for some businesses who happen to be in the residential area. So we need to take care that it is a focus on residences and not an opportunity for others to actually get some parking to service their commercial activity in the residential area because they haven't provided car parking.
So just in relation to that, we have had a situation like that already develop in 3rd and 4th Avenue where a person operates a business from home and is asking about provision of car parking for all of their work vehicles. So it is definitely an issue that will arise over time, but we are looking at this being targeted very much at residential parking only, not supporting businesses.
Thank you. Chair, happy to move the recommendation.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Bill. Second, Stephen. Any further questions? I told you it was exciting.
It's the most exciting one so far.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Yes, carried. Thanks. Thanks, Brendan. Spring Street car parking. Unexpected expenditure.
Kia ora. We've got Mark Ross in the lobby as well. So he's dialing in on Teams.
Okay.
I've just got a message that he's waiting to be accepted in. And while we wait for Mark, so the Spring Street car park was assessed as an earthquake-prone building, and we initiated a project to bring it up to the current building standard of code. And as we discussed under the first paper when we talked about developer contributions, this is a project that had a very robust estimate, robust design. We went into it with a high level of confidence. When we start drilling and get into it, we find services and reinforcing steel that weren't where they were actually designed to be, and hence there's been some increases in costs. So this paper basically asks for the approved that additional capital budget to be approved for the project, and happy to take questions on that, or Mark will help us out on that if there's anything.
Trying to get him in. So just so anyone listening to this knows, we have actually been in and had a look and had it explained to us. An amazing job, actually. Have to compliment the staff and those who worked on it, and of course bring attention to Naylor Love, who designed that special drilling rig to drill for, what is it, 8,000 bolts that went in. But it was quite a remarkable project, and so huge kudos to Mark and his team and Naylor Love who completed it. And we now have confidence that the building is up to standard, 67%? Yeah. Which is important for a public building. We're getting Mark in, can't get him in.
If there are no questions, on just to your comment, and I would like to just call out the project team for the award that they took out, and the Supreme Award and the New Zealand Health and Safety Awards late last year. The category was for the development of a New Zealand design or technology which eliminates or manages a risk to safety or health at work. So that's the drilling rig that you mentioned. So that it got national acknowledgement and took out that award, which is a fantastic achievement. So got on Mark and Naylor Love.
Right. And it's important that we recognise that. Oh, there he is. Hello, Mark. On mute. You're on mute. You're on mute. It's the phrase of the 20s. Good morning.
Apologies. Good morning. Sorry about that. My very fancy laptop didn't want to join the Zoom meeting, so I've just had to quickly download this on my cell phone. So apologies for the slight delay. I've obviously missed just the start of it. So we've just got to the paper?
Yep, we just got to the paper, and I just talked about the fact that we'd actually visited the building. You'd taken us through some of the difficulties that you encountered unexpectedly, and some of the design work around the steel structure, etc. And we've talked about Naylor Love's 8,000 volts and their recognition for that in the Supreme Award and the New Zealand Health and Safety Awards.
Yes, yeah. No, that was a great achievement. But did you want? I could probably add a little bit more background if you just wanted to go back a step, or if you've got any queries.
No, you can give us a bit more background, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So the project, I've been involved in the project since its initiation and design phase back in 2020. And it was always recognised as a bit of a challenging project, but we did heavily rely upon the as-built documentation that was quite very well detailed of the building when it was built to come up with a design. We had Dave Brunston from Kestrel sort of alongside us, just giving us a bit of a guidance along this step. These are early steps. And we were all happy with the design and how it was put together at the time. But we did acknowledge that we were working on some fine margins when it comes to drilling through into concrete or existing structure, and that proved to be a little bit of our undoing. So, but basically at the time of award, you may have read there that we thought we should add another 400 K to the project just as a contingency measure, but obviously we've exceeded that somewhat. So basically the additional funds has come through with required as the design changes is around $600,000. There's some electrical work that was discovered during the drilling through the slab. It was unfortunate that cables had been placed through the concrete, which meant we had to do $65,000 of some additional cabling throughout the building. As you've read there was a 5-month extension to the program, which resulted in a extension of time needed to be negotiated with Naylor Love. This came at 187,000, or negotiated to that, and some additional consultancy fees of 125,000. So I guess on reflection, the only thing we could have done, maybe improved better, would been if we had done some more invasive investigation throughout the building to establish the accuracy of our as-built documentation. I guess could be a reflection. But happy to answer any questions.
Thanks for that. So I guess one of the questions then is, because we run up against this, and how much investigation do you do while you're designing the project? Because you could do a hang of a lot that was unnecessary.
Yes.
Does it also then rely on us keeping good records when we do work? So, for instance, the electrical services within the floor slabs, is that not on record? So when people deviate or make a change to the plans, are we not recording that, catching that, so that it adds into the, what do you call it, the inbuilt, as-built?
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
Records.
Well, I think I'd have to say, that was a little bit of a surprise to us. That, I mean, electrical cabling's normally done by conduit and these types of buildings, and it would be fixed to the underside of the slab, like there was a lot of it in actual fact done that way. But some of the lighting circuits, we just happened to find them because they were within the slab. But that wouldn't have normally be done that way. And this was 35 years ago or so. And I think things have changed from there. But the documentation that we did have, the level of documentation of the structural steel elements, was very detailed. It probably is what's there, but the fact of the matter, when concrete is placed and reinforcements placed, sometimes it's moved 5 or 10 millimeters, and this proved to be the critical areas that we struggled to get through.
Okay. Any other questions for Mark? Shag.
Thanks, mate. Just picking up on Anne's point, thinking about what we are doing across the city. So I know it's not our building next door, and also Te Manawa, making sure that when all the documentation that we are, particularly for our newer facilities, making sure that we've got good systems in place to make sure that whether it's electrical, whether it's plumbing, whether it's steel or other materials, that we're not going to run into the same problem, say in 20 years' time, that our documentation hasn't been up to scratch. I suppose that's probably a challenge for me.
Yeah, look, I think the documentation that is required today for a consent is probably fair to say somewhat different, perhaps, to what it might have been 35 years ago, Chad. So I think there's probably better details and records of that within our documentation that we see.
I think though, it's making sure that when changes are made on site, isn't it, that's then recorded, because that's often when you might have the plans, but then something happens and a change is made, and it's recording that change, isn't it? Yes, yeah. Well, a lot of when it comes to sort of structural changes, they're captured, by virtue of, basically PS 1, 2, 3s and 4s. But unfortunately, yeah, it is a risk that electrical items, which aren't, monitored in such a way, can slip through the crack. Yeah. I must confess, done a few myself. Okay. Yep. Thank you. Did you have a question, or you second it? All right, so that's an additional 1,650,000 or 660,000. But we now have, and it's finished now. It's completed. Where did I see? Yeah, so it's now complete, and Spring Street is open. Yes, yeah, it is open. We're just we're just fitting some bollards that were decided that should be put around one of the structural elements that we've installed. But no, it's resuming its normality now. Great. Yeah. Well, I think that's the important thing, and the public can be confident that it's up to 67% of the standard. Yes. All right. Thank you. Moved, seconded. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thanks, Mark. Yep, thanks very much. Thank you. Right. Brendan and Reese back again to talk about our parking management plan, and it sort of involves Gareth as well, I think, who provided us with the exciting long list of work that's happening in the centre city. Even getting into the building today was pretty exciting.
Thank you. I guess the reason we're bringing the paper through is our parking strategy needs to be quite adaptive to what's going on. And I guess when we brought it through, probably almost 18 months ago now, some of the activities that we are now fully underway with weren't necessarily on the agenda, or the timing wasn't considered to be quite so early. So I think what we're looking at here is we're very aware economically things are tough. A lot of businesses are really struggling, and there has been a lot of information around about worker parking, etc., and the impact that has. So I think what we're proposing here is a further delay in the rollout of the additional paid car parking. That will allow us to have Devonport Road up and running, so that's another 100 car parks that will be up and running in March. It also gives time to get the residence permits up and running, so that by the time we do roll out the additional paid parking for those residents directly impacted through not having anything on site, we'll have that system up and running. So I think the delay is really acknowledgement on our behalf that we do need to take account of what's going on around us and work with the community to get the best outcome overall. I'm happy to take any questions.
No, I think it's a very sensible, pragmatic way. I think when you come back in the new year, we'd also like to have a look. I think part of it is also our usage still, because we want to make sure that turnover is happening and that people are using the car parks as I come in. You know, I still see a lot of empty car parks in the inner city, so we want to make sure that people are using those. But that's all part of that behaviour change, which has got to take place. So the narrative is changing a bit from there is no car parking in town to there is no free car parking in town, which is part of that change. But I think, look, it's really essential that our centre city businesses have a good summer, and there's going to be a lot of disruption between now and Christmas. So I think it is a very sensible thing to do. And working alongside the business sector shows them that we're listening and are prepared to be adaptive. So that's the main thing.
I'm happy to move, Chair.
Stephen, second. Make any comments?
Oh, just in terms of picking up that theme of acknowledgement, because Shad and I and Gareth met with a number of the businesses, particularly at the southern end of Devonport Road. So I think the work of the team in terms of the concerns expressed, but also understanding more fully what's happening in the CBD, and Gareth's original email summarising all that certainly brought it home to me, and then the subsequent work of the team in terms of the proposition to delay implementation until February. I think it does indicate in terms of we've heard some of the clear messaging and responding to that, but also let's actually finish some of those current initiatives before we actually implement this. So really supportive of where the recommendation has landed.
Check.
Just want to make some acknowledgements too, similar to Bill. So the removal of the buses from down on Willow Street and now access for parking. So yeah, it's great to see cars down there and not necessarily buses parked around the Willow Street site.
Shows that nagging actually works.
Great result. Thank you.
I think I've got a degree in it. But yes, I really appreciate it. I'm sorry I didn't mention that, but it was good to see those car parks back and acknowledge the regional council who did move their buses out eventually. But the more we can get in the city, I think.
Just in relation to Willow Street, we do have to go in and do a little bit of pavement work. There is some deterioration, but we've got the car parks in so they can be used straight away. And then the pavement work should be able to be done overnight, so they're able to be used in the interim.
And for the hospos, that was quite important because they're quite close for parking at night, going down into Wharf Street and some of the restaurants. Okay, yep, Shad.
Just thinking about the point that was raised about usage, it would be, well, I mean, I would find it really helpful to get a regular update about how car parks are being used across the city, occupancy, so whether that's the off-street or on-street parking, and availability of parks. So within the catchment, existing catchment, what is, on average, on a monthly basis, kind of, percentage-wise, what is available?
Would you like that into a council meeting or just brought through as part of our transport report?
I think if you just put it in the update, the commission catch up.
Okay.
On a monthly basis. It's just gives us, in the back of our minds, we just know what's happening.
Just, and on that, Chair, particularly in terms of that sort of late afternoon, evening message, because that's where we seem to get, there are issues. So if that's possible, so.
There are a couple of ways we can do that, so let me work on that a little bit for you and we can get it to you.
Thanks, Reece.
Yeah, I think it would be good to have that regular update, but I do think it would be quite good to report publicly.
On a quarterly basis.
Yes, just put the record straight, if you like.
Maybe in the exec report. Yeah. Yeah. Helps counter there are no car parks when you see coming in the morning that there's still hundreds available. Okay, so moved and seconded, and that just moves that expansion out until the 26th of February next year, gives a good summer period for the centre city and allows for all that disruption and activity that's going to be, but I shouldn't call it disruption, all that activity that's going to be happening, and will allow for quite a few of the projects to be finished. So Elizabeth Street, Tunks Reserve should be finished by then. So that end of town should be starting to look clear.
The new car parking.
The Dive Crescent will be finished.
Yeah.
The
And
new
together
car
with the
park at
Devonport Road, yeah.
that'll all be done. And this end of Cameron Road will be all completed. So this end of town will then start looking, apart from the construction sites, the road work should be looking quite good. Well, they should be looking really good. And just gives a bit of respite. Okay, I'll put that in. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thanks very much. Thanks, Reece and Brendan. So I think now we're going to go into public excluded. Is that right? You're going to do public excluded? And we're doing the hearings, we'll go into the hearings after lunch. So can I have a motion, thanks Chad and Bill seconding, to go into public excluded for the reasons outlined in the agenda. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. It's amazing work that Kim has done. Oh, yes. Data.